Video is the first in a series of videos that Testiv will be putting up on the lessons page here to serve as a reference for any student that is struggling with the ACT English test. This is just here to help you score as highly as you can on the exam. This particular video is going to serve as an overview of the English test. What is it? What does it consist of? And it's going to serve to provide you with some strategies that are going to be useful as you approach any sort of English test question that might come your way. So without further ado, let me give you a very warm welcome. Tonight marks the start of your journey toward mastering the ACT English test. And I know what you might be thinking there, not another one of those English tests. I've taken so many of them. But I'm about to show you this is going to be slightly different from anything you may have seen in school so far. My name is Carlos Cousins. I'm a Testiv coach, teacher, and at this point an ACT and college prep guru. And I'm just going to be going over all of this information here with you today. So what is this test about? The test in a nutshell. So the ACT English test is a 75 question, 45-minute test which evaluates your skills at employing standard English grammar and evaluating style and rhetorical devices. So as you can see, you have many more questions. You have minutes to answer them, but these questions tend to be they tend not to take a lot of time naturally. They will be associated to passages, however, that you should read before approaching these questions. So the ACT English test is going to consist of 5 essays, each of which is going to be accompanied by a set of multiple choice questions. And these questions are going to offer alternatives to the underlined portions of a sentence in the passage, or maybe to an entire passage provided. Some questions are going to ask about a section of a passage. Some questions are going to ask about the passage as a whole. Now, in the actual exam, you're going to have these passages as shown in the red book that the ACT puts out, the official ACT study guide. Um, there's going to be numbers that are going to refer to correspondingly numbered underlined portions in the text, and there's going to be boxes in the text. But how does Testiv approach this? So the Testiv approach is very similar, except for some minor differences here. So we're numbering the paragraphs just as you will see on the actual exam, but rather than underlining and numbering sections that questions are associated with, we're simply highlighting the important information that you need to look at in order to answer the question and providing it to you side by side. So you'll have the passage, as you can see here on the right, and the question on the left. Half the time a question won't actually be explicitly asked, but we will provide the sorts of alternatives that the ACT exam would. Of course, the boxes that are provided on the test are going to be provided as well here. But the way we, I guess, signal that that is the section that we want to be dealing with is we highlight that box in yellow as well. So it's not that different, but it is slightly different, and it's important to get through this the just how both of these formats differ from each other. So what is the ACT's approach to this test? So the ACT English test, they tell us, is not about the following things. It's not about rote recall of facts outside of what the passage is providing. So you shouldn't use outside knowledge at any point in time. That can be considered an assumption and can lead you to choose answer choices that are incorrect. It's definitely not about isolated vocabulary terms. So if you're familiar with the SAT, and soon to be the old SAT, since starting next year, the SAT is going to be completely restructured, and this may no longer be a feature. But vocabulary terms are no longer, are not presented in isolation here. They're presented in the context of a passage. So the key word is isolated. You will have to understand what vocabulary means, but in the context of a passage. And then, of course, it's not about rules of formal logic at all. The makers of the ACT say that the English test can be boiled down into 2 basic categories, and those are usage and mechanics. That's one of them, and then rhetorical skills. So what exactly do they mean by these things? Let's take a closer look. So usage and mechanics. Usage and mechanics is composed of 3 different subcategories here. We've got punctuation, which makes 10 to 15% of the test makes up that amount, and it's measuring specifically. It's testing how internal and end of sentence punctuation relates to meaning. So what you want to do here is avoid ambiguity, a positives. Um, 10 to 20% of the test is grammar and usage, by which they mean specifically subject-verb agreement, pronoun antecedent agreement, modifiers and words modified and how they agree, verb formation, pronoun case, comparatives, superlatives, and idioms. 20 to 25% of the test is measuring sentence structure, so specifically the placement of modifiers, the relationship between clauses, shifts in construction, etc. Now, rhetorical skills. So rhetorical skills is itself divided into three subcategories, and these they tell us are strategies. 15% to 20% of the test questions are going to be strategy questions, and this has to do with uh, choosing the appropriate expression, judging the effect of adding, revising, or deleting supporting material, judging the relevance of statements in the context they're provided. Organization is going to make 10 to 15% of this, and it's organization of ideas. um, can you identify effective opening, transitional, or closing sentences? And then 20 to 25% will be style. So the selection of precise and appropriate words and images, maintaining the level of style and tone in an essay, rhetorical effectiveness, and then being able to avoid ambiguous pronouns, wordiness, and redundancy. Now, a quick question, which we've asked for all other test types. Can you remember any of what I've just said? And this is where Testive shines. So let's go a little bit more in detail as to why Testive provides a better paradigm. So it's important to note really quick here after going through that the ACT English test questions are going to test any number of the aforementioned skills and subskills at the same time. So every multiple choice question is likely to have distractor options that might actually be leading you to think that you should use a skill that may not be the one that the question requires you to use to get the right answer. And it's best to develop a familiarity with each ACT English test skill then by doing ACT English test questions targeting those skills. Now, remembering all the skills you need to master can be difficult and daunting, and it's not a good idea. It's definitely not something we recommend. Instead, gaining testing experience, employing all of these skills simultaneously is what is most likely to raise your score. And of course, thinking, reflecting upon the questions you get wrong, and figuring out what you can do better the next time you see that sort of question the next time around. So TestIf is going to group ACT English questions into 4 question types, and these are the only question types that you will see us refer to. And these are verbs, run-ons and fragments, meaning, structure, and diction, and pronouns. Now, we do also offer a complete passage practice category in the spirit of encouraging that you practice all of these things simultaneously. Now, what does this mean? Why are we talking about this? So, for example, consider the following verbs question. You got here a portion of a passage that's highlighted. In the test, you'd see it underlined, and different answer choices that you would consider upon looking at this question. Now, to figure out which of these is correct, you'd have to understand subject-verb agreement, but also avoiding redundancy and choosing appropriate expressions, so that you avoid the question that means the same as adhesive that holds, adhesive that has been holding. You would have to know to avoid redundancy, for example. And then these, if you think about it, these are skills that are spanning 3 ACT categories that are straddling usage and mechanics and rhetorical skills. So you really shouldn't be crossing out or canceling in your mind out specific skills just because you're working in a different section. Rather than ruling out the use of skills per question type, you need to get practice pulling from the wealth of the skills that are going to be measured by this test. And it's going to be very, very important to dissect the essay for this sort of question, even though it's not a reading comprehension exercise. It does test your ability to understand grammar as it works in the context of a passage. So before you approach any multiple choice questions, read and understand the passage. Be on the lookout for the topic that the author is discussing. And just ask yourself a few questions. Who or what is the passage about? And keep it simple. If it's a story about a dog, it's a story about a dog. But keep that in mind as you start to focus in on identifying what the main idea is. What exactly was the author trying to say? Why was the story about a dog being told? And then locate and mark what you believe the thesis statement to be. Now, this is not always going to be the last sentence of the first paragraph, and it's not always a single sentence. But whatever you find, try to find evidence to back up that claim. And if you can find the evidence, then that might be a good thesis statement. If you can't, you should really reconsider what you thought the point of this passage is. Watch out for distractors in the introduction. A lot of the time, the intro is going to come up with completely different ideas to really the point of what the passage is going over, what the essay is really about. Um, and try to continually ask yourself, what's the crux of the argument? Why are we considering this at all? What is the author trying to prove or disprove or ask? A lot of the times these essays are more wonderings rather than trying to convince anyone of anything. And you have to be on the lookout for the intention of the author. Of course, underline and circle whatever you believe to be evidence to whatever main idea, thesis, couple of sentences you think you have found. And this is going to help you distinguish relevant from irrelevant information to a specific question. What pieces of evidence does the author give to back up her claim? It's something you should be constantly asking yourself. And this is important to answer questions which obviously make use of the rhetorical type of skills. Because if you don't know what the purpose of the sentence is provided is, you're very unlikely to be able to answer questions that are measuring that skill. So keep in mind, while this is not a reading comprehension test, then understanding the context of the sentence in the passage provided is going to be key to getting to choosing the best answer choice. And this isn't merely a grammar test, though grammar is important. Often, two choices will be grammatically correct. And you should really be asking yourself two things. What is the most appropriate way to say this? What's the best way of saying what I need to get across? And for what purpose? Why? Why would the author want to say it one way rather than another? What purpose does that accomplish? And if you can answer both of those questions and feel secure in your answer, you're far more likely to select the right answer choice than if you don't. You really need to keep these answers in your head as you go through this. Sorry, these questions in your head as you go through this. And of course, as with all ACT tests, remember that the difficult questions are interspersed with the easier ones, and there's no penalty for a wrong response. So attempting all questions is in your best interest. If you run out of time by the end of the exam, and you don't have time to really consider the questions that you skipped, make sure that you guess something. It's in your best interest not to omit questions. If you struggle understanding a passage, you should go back and read it again. But by the time you hit exam day, you should be in the habit of reading closely and really not going through, not stopping if you don't understand something, so that by the time that you've read the passage once, answering the questions becomes very easy. Don't waste time reading the passage over and over and over again. Though if really after you thought you'd understood the passage, you get to the end, and for some reason you feel you no longer understand it, going back and rereading once is fine. Um, Now, I'm not going to say good luck for this portion of the exam. I'm going to say good fortune, as I have for the ACT Science, the ACT Math. Um, what this fortune cookie is telling you is that you will be rewarded for your efforts. This isn't really a matter of luck. The more of these types of questions that you do, the better that you'll do on the exam. And I'm just trying to drive that point um, really hard here. If you put the work into it, you'll reap the results. And as I have done for other introductory lessons in the past, I'm going to leave a pop quiz sort of question here up on here, and the answer will be provided in a subsequent video dealing with the English test that you should be able to access right underneath the link for this one. So good fortune in the exam and happy prepping.